I am going to go ahead and get started with some introductions, and people will continue to join us as we go. So thank you again, everyone out there, for joining us today. If you haven't already, feel free to say hello in the chat box and let us know where you're tuning in from today. My name is Allison Titus, and I am the Community Education Manager here at the Laguna Foundation. And I will be moderating this panel discussion today. So I will introduce the Laguna Foundation and Ag and Open Space and give you some housekeeping notes to get started before I introduce our wonderful panelists. So I just wanted to note that this is our first event in the Early Career Conservationist of Sonoma County series with the Laguna Foundation and Ag and Open Space, which is an extension of a popular panel discussion we hosted this past fall. There are 2 more events coming up in this series. Next week, we will hear from young people working to address climate change, one of the most pressing issues of our time, and the particular challenges and opportunities that exist there. Then we will end this series by kind of flipping the script and hearing from mentors, people who empower and support these early career leaders that we are hearing from. They will give insight and tips, not just to aspiring environmental professionals, but also to other mentors and managers in the environmental field. I encourage you to register for the following events and share with any people you know who may be interested. All of these events will be recorded and sent to registrants after the event. So please feel free to ask questions as we go along in the chat box for our panelists, and we will have a brief Q&A section at the end of the panel. So a little bit about who we are. The Laguna Foundation is a nonprofit organization based in Santa Rosa that works to restore, conserve, and inspire public appreciation for the Laguna de Santa Rosa wetlands. The Laguna is a wetland and a 22-mile-long waterway, as well as an entire watershed that encompasses Santa Rosa, Cotati, Rohnert Park, and parts of Sebastopol and Windsor. The Laguna de Santa Rosa wetlands have been heavily impacted by development and face important issues that drive our restoration, conservation, and education work today. Just to give you an idea, in more modern history, the Laguna has gone from being described as devoid of aquatic life in the 1970s to being designated as a wetland of international importance 10 years ago, this year, actually, 10 years ago this year, because of the incredible biodiversity that is found here. Even with that designation, there is still a lot of work to be done, and that's where we come in. The Laguna today has poor water quality, high amounts of introduced species that threaten the very biodiversity that makes it special, impacts from wildfires on the outskirts of the watershed, and many people do not know why the Laguna is so important or even where it is, even though it sustains over 250,000 people in Sonoma County, in addition to the plants and animals. And we do this important work of conserving this watershed and working to restore wetland habitat, improve water quality, and educate and inspire future generations with the support and partnership of organizations like Ag and Open Space, so that the Laguna is a place to enjoy and protect for years to come. We host outings on, learn about, and explore the open space that Ag and Open Space has preserved and protected with conservation easements, over 122,000 acres in Sonoma County to date. And this panel is made possible with your public support of Ag and Open Space and conservation in Sonoma County. I want to give a special thanks to all of our panelists for being here today and taking time out of their busy schedules to have this candid discussion with us all. I also want to acknowledge and thank you for representing your organizations, our partners here in Sonoma County, Point Blue Conservation Science, Ag and Open Space, and Sonoma Water, in addition to the Laguna Foundation. You will hear me say, if you attend this entire series, you will hear me say at each of these events that this panel could include many, many more people working to advance this field in this county. And I really can't overstate that enough. So many inspiring women and others work at the environmental organizations, agencies, and movements in this county. We have 4 panelists with us here today who are doing hands-on conservation work as stewardship specialists and educators who can offer perspective as someone doing the critical on-the-ground work while also planning projects, supervising and empowering interns and other field staff in some cases, and looking for ways to advance and improve the field. We will talk about highlights, your different career paths, challenges experienced in the environmental field, and tips for aspiring conservationists out there. And we will do this using an intersectional framing to understand how women conservation leaders' experiences of gender-related challenges connect and are amplified by race, age, and other demographics or other things that people experience at different levels within organizational hierarchies. So want to keep that in mind. That's our lens for today. I'm also so fortunate to have worked alongside all of you and consider you as friends and peers. And I'm really excited for this conversation with all of you. And that is my spiel. Everyone, please feel free. Remember, we can ask questions as we go along. Love to know who's out there. Thank you. And we will get started with some introductions. I will say, I will just repeat that I'm going to let these amazing folks introduce themselves and their work, but with us today, we have Taylor Acosta from Sonoma Ag Open Space, Annie Madden with the Laguna Foundation, Sophie Noda from Point Blue Conservation Science, and Shelly Spriggs with the Laguna Foundation and Sonoma Water. And we will get started with some introductions from Taylor to start us off. Thank you. Let me stop sharing my screen.
All right, hi everyone. I am Taylor. I do work for Sonoma County Ag and Open Space. I am a stewardship technician there, so I work to monitor our conservation easements that we hold over properties and make sure that the landowners and landholders are in compliance with the values that we chose to protect on those properties.
Awesome, thanks Taylor. Great to have you here and it's great to work with you. I'll pass it on over to Shelly.
Thanks, Allison. Hello, everyone. My name is Shelly. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm just super grateful to be here with all of you today, getting to talk about all of our experiences, just feeling full of gratitude. I'm calling in today from Petaluma, California, the ancestral land of the Coast Miwok people, and specifically the Alaguali tribelet. And it is just such a beautiful afternoon out here. I can look out the window and see blue skies and bluebirds. And just to tell you a little bit about me, I am a wildlife tracker. It is my most favorite thing to do in the whole world, to follow around these animals and look for the clues that are left behind. I also love sunshine and being outside, and anytime I'm out observing nature. So my work right now, I work in both conservation and education. And so as an educator, I work for Sonoma Water, leading environmental field trips. And so right now that looks like doing virtual field trips for predominantly 5th graders, zooming into their classrooms and teaching them about the Russian River watershed and where their water comes from and water quality and the fisheries and all sorts of really fun and important things. And then I work for the Laguna Foundation as the wildlife program manager. And so I've been hired on to work on this really incredible project studying the Copeland Creek watershed and looking at how are animals currently moving within this area, where are the areas that are really key for connectivity and permeability for their movement? And then where are those movement barriers? And then what can we do to address them and improve them?
Thanks, Shelly, and thank you for representing both the Laguna Foundation and Sonoma Water and getting to talk a little bit about both the conservation work you're doing and the education work about that conservation as well. I'll go ahead and pass it over to Sophie.
Hi, everyone. My name is Sophie Noda. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm really excited to be here with alongside other amazing women. I am currently a bird banding intern with Point Blue Conservation Science, which is a conservation science nonprofit based in Sonoma County. However, I am currently based at a field station on the southern end of Point Reyes National Seashore in Marin County. And I get to live and work here, which is amazing, just outside Bolinas, California, the ancestral lands of the Coast Miwok. And I was first a bird banding intern in the summer of 2019. And then I returned to this role for this fall and winter. I've also been a straw intern with Point Blue. STRAW is a program that it's an acronym actually, and it stands for Students and Teachers Restoring a Watershed. And in a couple of weeks, I will be starting a new role with Point Blue as a field technician in their working lands group. And I'll be taking soil, plant, and bird monitoring data in rangelands all over California. I'll pass it back to you, Allison.
Thanks, Sophie. And Annie, how about you?
Hey, afternoon, everyone. Congratulations, Sophie. That's exciting. My name's Annie Madden. I use she, her pronouns. And a little bit about me personally is I have a very nurturing spirit. So I spend a lot of my free time with my pet dog, and I'm powered by avocados. As Allison introduced me, I am a restoration field supervisor with the Laguna Foundation. And I'm very fortunate to be in this position because it allows me to do a wide variety of work and projects. So my typical day could vary from being face down in a vernal pool, monitoring rare and endangered plants, all the way to managing invasive Himalayan blackberry along an urban creek, or some days I'm assisting Shelly on the Wildlife Corridor project, or I'm digging up bare roots in the nursery. So I really love my job and the support I get from the foundation to continue growing. And yeah, that's me. Back to you, Allison.
There's some support in the chat saying that avocados and puppies power me too. So thanks for sharing. And Annie, you mentioned that you do a wide variety of work. And the next thing we are going to talk about is projects or programs that you all are currently working on that you're most proud of or most excited about. So I would love to hear from you. Out of that wide variety that you mentioned, is there a particular project or program that you really enjoy working on? And can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, of course. So a project that I have been focused on and really connecting with over the past year is a urban creek in Sebastopol. It's called Zimfer Creek. It's a tributary to the Laguna main channel. This spot's pretty interesting because the headwaters originate in Sebastopol near St. Sebastian's Church. And then the creek actually lives most of its life underground, flowing through culverts under Sebastopol. Where it daylights is where it meets the Laguna at the confluence, and that is actually where our restoration site is. So that's kind of the picture of where our site is. The project began in 2017. And so I was not with the foundation at that point. I've only been here about a year. So how it originally started, from stories that I've heard and reports that I've read and pictures that I've seen, is that this creek was dominated by a 10-foot wall of invasive Himalayan blackberry. And because of that, there was trash buildup and wildlife couldn't move through and the community couldn't use it. So Laguna Foundation partnered with the county and the city of Sebastopol, along with a ton of volunteers, to restore this section of this urban creek. The initial removal of the blackberry, so sorry, let me back up. There was an initial removal of the Himalayan blackberry, and right after that is when the volunteers came in and removed mountains of trash. I mean, I can't even put into words how much trash was pulled out. There were over 100 tires. There was a 50-gallon oil drum. I mean, just so much. And so the blackberry was removed, the trash was picked up, and then the next step was to restore the native herbaceous understory. And so volunteers came together, the Laguna Foundation came together and planted thousands of native grasses. Some of those included basket sedge, some native rush. They seeded with the native meadow barley, and then did some dogwood plantings and elderberry. So that was like the big move. At the beginning of 2020 is when I adopted this project. And I say adopted because I feel like I really did build a connection by working there for a full year. And it's when all the excitement happened. After the initial planting is when the management began. And that's really where my heart lies, is in the management. And so what we kind of came up with plan-wise is that we would go to Zimpher Creek and we would do a strategic weed whacking and hand weeding every month, just once a month, 8 hours, no more, no less. And I guess we would hand water the native plants. And so I spent time basically each month seeing a decrease in the native or in the invasive Himalayan blackberry, and then an increase in the natives. And the natives actually ended up getting an upper hand on this site. And so seeing that and fostering that was just something I hadn't seen before. So it was very special to me. I actually went back last week to do a site check and take some pictures of this area. And I mean, I can't even put into words again how beautiful it is. It's now this diverse, wet meadow. There's just native grasses everywhere. The trees are just standing tall. I actually saw an otter swim through Zimpher Creek. So we're seeing the wildlife coming back. We're seeing the community come back from this tiny little restoration site. I mean, it's just beautiful. To me, that's like the big thing too, is this is now a green space for Sebastopol. They can go and they can enjoy it. And it's a model now. We have current projects on these urban creeks, and this is now a model of what we can do to move forward. We can tend these landscapes. We don't need to come in. We don't need to be super invasive. We can just nurture these plants to come back and restore a creek. So I think that's my favorite project. Yeah, I mean, that's all I got on that. So
that is so great. Thank you for sharing. I mean, so much there. I guess I really wanted to highlight. So this is a place that people can go see. This is along the AmeriCorps Trail in Sebastopol. For those of you that are local, you can see this amazing meadow that Annie is describing and know that now you have some insight as to what it took to get it to that place. And I would encourage you to do that. So the AmeriCorps Trail in Sebastopol, right? Annie is the, okay.
Yep, down near the Barlow.
Awesome. Yeah, so next time you're hanging out at the Barlow, just take a little detour, go down by the AmeriCorps Trail and check this site out. And thank you so much for sharing your excitement about it. And I know from working at the Laguna Foundation that is a lot of our restoration stories do start with that initial removal of a lot of Himalayan blackberry and a lot of trash. So it really is a great model for projects going forward. So I would love to hand it over to Sophie to hear a little more about a project or program that you're currently working on that you're most proud of, or something that you're really excited about in your work, what drives you on a day-to-day basis.
Sure. And yeah, I want to acknowledge how exciting it is to hear a restoration success story. I'm excited to visit that spot next time I'm hanging out at the Barlow. Even though I've been a part of some really awesome projects and programs in my work, I wanted to speak about a project I'm working on that isn't related to my work organizationally. And that is a group that I helped start last summer called the Inclusive Ecology Network. And a group of friends from school and I formed this group to build community among Black, Indigenous, and people of color in the ecological fields and work to increase representation and recognition in our fields. My hope for this group that is still like small and growing is that it can empower BIPOC folks in this field and that we can build systems of support for each other. And this might be in a job search or navigating a field where you don't feel seen or represented. But ultimately, I just think it's really powerful and it feels really powerful to be a part of a group of people that are working in the environmental fields or are wanting to work in these fields and haven't been able to yet. And just having that community in a field that I haven't really felt represented in is just really powerful. And so that's what we're trying to do. And we're trying to build resources and visibility for people of color in this field. And it's just really cool and fulfilling to be able to work on a project outside of my day job and collaborate with friends. And yeah, you can find us on Instagram. If you look up Inclusive Ecology Network. Yeah, I'll pass it back to you, Allison.
Yes, I was going to say that I will include that name and the Instagram handle in our follow-up email for those of you out there who would like to follow along and check out these resources that are being built over at the Inclusive Ecology Network. And it is really powerful. And that is so awesome that you are doing this work. I mean, outside of your regular work time, which is already, a lot of effort and energy. So thank you so much. I'm excited to see how that progresses too. I think it's super important. Shelly, what is a project or a program or something you're really excited about?
Yeah, thanks, Allison. I first just want to, share my enthusiasm listening to both Annie and Sophie talk. I feel like I was right there with you, Annie, when you were describing that river otter and the creek, and right there with you, Sophie, when you were just describing the inclusive ecological network and how important that work really is. So thanks for doing that. I thought about this question and it was a tough one, choosing, a project that you're feeling really proud of. And I am lucky that I get to work on such a wide variety of projects within both of my roles. And so picking one felt really challenging. And what I realized is that there's sort of one facet of my work that I'm the most proud of, and that shows up in a multitude of different projects. And that is really facilitating and helping others to build relationship. So kind of keying in on that, building relationship between people and their environments. And so I get to do that in a lot of different ways with the students on field trips. So I get to help them build relationship with literally this watershed that's providing their drinking water. And is just taking such good care of all of us and being able to deepen that understanding, especially about these threatened and endangered salmonids that are living in the river and our impacts. And just, I feel like there's a lot of, meaning and change that comes from our young people being able to build those relationships. And then, when I'm working on the wildlife corridor project and I might be going out on the headwaters of Copeland Creek up on Sonoma Mountain, placing or checking wildlife cameras for monitoring. I might be down in the urban sections, walking underneath 101, doing track and science surveys, or actually like taking measuring tape and measuring the openings that the animals have to move through and noting what type of surface, the substrate that they're walking on. And so I feel like through that tracking, I really get to go out and tease out these different stories that are written on this landscape. And I get to bring that story of this wildlife and how they're moving to the community, and really get to foster those relationships, so that there's just so much care and stewardship that can be inspired by really being able to share these stories. And then I just also wanted to share the Copeland project is funded by the Federated Indians of Great Rancheria. And so they are a local entity that's made up of the Coast Miwok and Southern Pomo peoples. And with this project, I've also had the incredible opportunity to personally be able to start building relationship with them. And in particular, this one tribal elder that I've been getting to work with, David Correa, I just want to give him a shout out and say that I'm really proud to be able to personally be involved in this project and being able to facilitate that relationship building and all of the things that I do.
Yeah, I'm realizing this is a hard question when your panelists are all involved at so many different levels of this work, or have jobs that inherently mean you do so many different things. And I know that is probably, at least for Taylor probably visits lots of different places and is a part of a lot of different projects. So I will pass it over to you to answer this question as well.
Thanks, Allison. Yeah, I've been a COVID virtual employee, so I haven't been able to actually have my hands in as many projects ideally as I normally would. But I did inherit a really cool, it's becoming kind of like a restoration project on one of our lands that we own in fee. And this property is in the Santa Rosa Plain, and it's pretty small, and it's surrounded by all urban, houses and the railroad tracks. And it's a spot where there's 2 state and federally endangered plant species, Sonoma sunshine and the Sebastopol metaphone. And so we're actually working with the Laguna Foundation. They've been surveying this property for many years. I think 2007 is when they started taking annual surveys out there. And last year, I came into the project and we wanted to do like a comprehensive survey the whole property, make sure that we can keep an eye on these 2 species for I think 3 consecutive seasons is what we've been advised to do. And so we did that. We worked with some of the field staff there, and the plants they struggled last spring. Here in Sonoma County, it was pretty dry, and it hopefully does not happen, but it may happen again. It seems like spring already. And so they surveyed those plants for us, and we're working to create a restoration plan. This involves getting grazing back on the property, which we did do last year. I think we had about 10 or 11 cows out there from the neighboring property. And I was out there, and we monitored these the grazing just to keep track of how well they actually did and how they dispersed across the whole property, and they did great. And I think it'll mitigate the effects of maybe having less rain this year. We'll see. And on top of that, we're also hoping to get some of the members of the public out there to help us with the restoration. So everyone keep an eye out for that, and you can help us. Thank you.
Yeah, something that I can say I am personally really looking forward to and excited about in my own work is getting to go out with Taylor to this site and get to see it and plan for bringing the public out there. So it's a really cool connection, and that work of, preserving and protecting those endangered species, like there's so rare and limited, and this property is small, but it's so critical as refugia for those particular species. So that is a really cool project, and I'm excited to get out there and see it too, and to bring others out there as well. So I'm really looking forward to that collaboration personally as well. So thank you all. One of the challenges with moderating these panels is I get really excited and inspired by everything that you all are saying. And with this particular question, it's just so great to hear what you all are passionate about, to hear your expertise and all of the things that you are doing in your careers. That is so inspiring. So thank you for sharing. I want to hear now a little bit more, maybe like a deeper dive into how you came to work in conservation. Maybe a little bit more about your story as to how you got here, and did you see yourself represented in this work? Is that a part of your story as well? And I will go ahead and start with Shelly for this question.
Okay, thanks, Allison. Yeah, so a little bit about how I got to where I am. I think that for me, there was, a couple different areas that all kind of came together. And so I feel like a big piece of how I got here was really hard work. And so I've spent, years volunteering my time, working in really underpaid internship positions. Also, I've had the opportunity to do some work trade for some folks. So I really, in tracking, we call it dirt time. And it's like, you can learn to recognize these different animal tracks and signs, but really that recognition only comes through after spending hours, like thousands and, tens of thousands of hours looking at the dirt. And so I feel like that is sort of mirrored in my process of how I came to this work in conservation. Is just like really spending that dirt time, getting as much experience as I could and working really hard, often, not at a adequately compensated position. And then speaking of that work trade, I want to shout out mentorship is a huge way that I got to where I am. I don't hold any formal degrees. And so my sort of socioeconomic background, that was a big barrier for me. And so the way that I have chosen to maneuver around that is that I've been really lucky to have people in my life that have been willing to mentor me. And that I've done work trade for. And so I want to give a big shout out to Megan Walla-Murphy. She is my tracking teacher and my mentor and my dear friend, and has just been an incredible influence in my life and helping me to be able to get to where I am. And then I think the other piece that got me here is really like seizing opportunities. I think that I have been lucky. I started maybe 6-7 years ago as an intern with the Sonoma County Regional Parks, as an education intern, and I spent about 5 years with the regional parks and slowly sort of making my way up through these different job levels. Never making it quite to that full-time permanent job, but still just like kind of working my way up through the ranks and feeling like I was lucky enough to have leadership really recognize my potential and be willing to offer me opportunities. And so I like seized those opportunities and was like, yes, I will do that for you. And then I feel like that loops me back to the hard work, right? It's just like, and then hustle and then get it done. So I think a big part of, my story has been just that experience, and then really highlighting that mentorship piece, that there's been incredible people that have helped me get to where I am. So, talking about, did I see myself represented in this work? If I'm answering that question as a woman, I think that in the education realm, I have seen many women. I see women well represented in education, but that's not necessarily true in the conservation realm. There is definitely a lot less women, especially in these really leadership positions that I've witnessed. But as I mentioned with Megan Waller-Murphy, I did have one really incredible woman that I could see myself in, that was doing this really important conservation work. Like, I mean, for lack of a better term, just like kick-ass work, right? Like, this woman is getting some incredible things done. And so I feel like to be able to have even just one or a handful has been really empowering to me through this process. And I think that we're all here because we're working to like build up that representation in the fields. And yeah, I think I'm going to end there. Thanks, Allison.
Thank you. Oh, there's so much I want to highlight there. I hear time and time again how critical mentorship is in this work, especially, if you are coming from an underrepresented group, it just gets more critical to have, people who are empowering you and supporting you. And I really appreciate you bringing up this, the barriers and unique challenges you faced with not having a formal degree, and like how it made, all this hard work you did to get to where you are. And for folks out there who have a similar path, I hope that this is inspiring. Like, there's so many good things that you can do and so many skills that can be learned outside of a formal institution. And I think there's a lot of opportunity for plugging people into this work based on those types of skills that you can gain. So thank you for sharing that. And, I also, it is like a lot of hard work and a lot of unpaid work. And I'm sure, that is a challenge that continues to be a challenge, I think, for this entire field, the fact that that has been a standard for the past while. So all just great things to bring up. I will pass it on over to Sophie.
So I really work in bird conservation specifically, and I came to work in bird conservation because after classes and internships in college, I just really wanted to work with birds. Like, learning about birds and natural history broadly was like the first time science really clicked for me. Like, I didn't think I liked science, and going into college, I didn't want to study science because I just thought it was too hard, and I couldn't really connect with it. And for some reason, just having really amazing teachers, I think, learning about natural history and birds really clicked for me and made me excited about science. I think part of that is just like when you're a kid, you're not really given a holistic view of what a scientist is, and so it's hard to see yourself in a role as a scientist when you don't really know what that looks like. So I knew some friends and some teachers that had made avian ecology and bird conservation jobs work, like made a career in that. And so I thought that I would give it a shot, and it did require me taking internships that were unpaid, and I just loved it. Like, it was early mornings and like spending all my time outside, and I just really fell in love with that work. And also bird band. So now I'm a bird banding intern for the second time. And if you don't know what bird banding is, it's a way of monitoring bird populations by putting little aluminum bands on their legs. And they have tiny numbers on them, so we can track birds and their populations through individuals that way. And it's such a cool job, and I feel really lucky to have gotten here. And unfortunately, it's like it's a pretty challenging field to be in terms of like work availability, finding jobs that pay. Point Blue recently, last year, changed their internship so that we get paid an hourly wage that's above minimum wage, which is so cool and like a huge stride for Point Blue, honestly. And so that makes like giving interns a livable wage makes it so much more accessible, and which is really, really awesome. I've not seen myself represented in this field. I identify as Japanese American, and I don't see Asian people in this field very much. I don't see people of color in this field very much. And some of my members of my intern cohorts I've been a part of have been Asian and people of color, and it feels really good to work alongside people that look like me and have similar experiences in life growing up as a person of color. And that being said, most of my mentors and supervisors, if not all of them, have been white. And I felt incredibly supported by them and have found incredible mentors in them. But I guess that's not really the point. And for me, has been difficult seeing myself succeed in a field where there aren't people that look like me in positions I aspire for. And I know that's true for other people of color in this field because we talk about it. It's a shared experience. And I think that's why there's so much important work to be done in conservation to hire equitably and hire diverse candidates. So like in our organizations, if they have diverse intern cohorts, is there retention there in the organization? Is there an opportunity for us to grow into a position that isn't seasonal or that can allow people to pay for their rent or allow people to save money? And I think if we don't get more people of color empowered in roles, then I'm really worried that early career folks like myself will get discouraged and not see themselves in those like more long-term sustainable positions. Yeah, that's my spiel.
Yeah, I think that is all super, super important. And thank you, for bringing that up and sharing that part of your career path. I did just want to know, and this is something that Sophie and I talked about yesterday, that, the environmental organizations, have embarked on this journey toward becoming more inclusive and more equitable. There was a study done a couple years ago, the Green 2.0 report. Some of you are probably familiar with this. That measured this progress and measured where environmental organizations are at in terms of their diversity and their inclusion. And it feels really important to me at this Women in Conservation panel to mention that where the strides have been made historically in environmental organizations towards diversity is with including women in leadership positions, and specifically mainly white women. It says that I think it's like 70% of executive director positions in environmental grant making foundations are white women, and 30% of top positions. So strides have been made in including women, but that needs to be expanded. And I think that there is more work to be done with bringing this field or making more progress towards becoming diverse and equitable. So I did want to bring that in and acknowledge that as well. So, and thank you, Sophie, for bringing it up. I will take it over to Annie. So how did you come to work in the conservation field, your story, a little bit of a deeper dive and where you saw yourself in this work?
Yeah, I'll just start by saying thank you, Shelly and Sophie, for sharing and your honesty. I really appreciated it. So I really resonated with Shelly's background and story. I have something very similar. The only difference is how I got to where I am now is by a plane. I say that because I actually grew up in a little teeny tiny town in Missouri of maybe 3,000 or 4,000 people. So imagine flat cornfields, perfect lawns, big houses. Conservation wasn't talked about at the dinner table. So it wasn't till 2012 when I actually moved to Sonoma County where I experienced a whole new world. I mean, you live here. Some of you may not. Maybe you're in Oregon or LA, but it's diverse here. So, you know, coming from cornfields to oak woodlands was life-changing. So that's kind of like my childhood background. Once I finished high school, I decided I didn't want to go to a university, so I chose the Santa Rosa Junior College, and I kind of was just taking some general ed classes, you know, not sure what I wanted to do. And it wasn't until I met a good friend, Melanie, who works for Regional Parks, who actually introduced me to the Natural Resource Management program. The first class I took was trees and shrubs. Okay, like trees and shrubs, a class about trees. I couldn't believe it. I was amazed. I met such cool people. I had an amazing teacher, Casey Wade. Shout out Casey Wade. Many of you probably know her. And that's where the spark just began. So I ended up taking every single natural resource class that I could. I got as many associate's degrees as I could. Worked for Sonoma County Regional Parks for a little. Decided I need to get, as Shelly would say, some more dirt time. I needed that hands-on experience. So I applied for an internship with the Laguna Foundation and spent a season interning. And that is actually where I met my mentor, Asa Voigt, who I am just so fortunate to work alongside now. He has so many skills in ecology. He builds me up as a leader. And so I'm just gonna say it as well, mentorship was a big drive for, you know, just entering this field. I'll also emphasize that it wasn't an easy decision at all to take this internship. I knew it was my passion. I knew I wanted this experience, but I chose to work for free. I chose to do 3 jobs in school and just pile on this load of work so I could get that experience, so I could go out on the land and actually observe it rather than read about it in a textbook. So yeah, ended up working through an internship and then was offered a position with the Laguna Foundation and decided then and there that I was burnt out from school and I'm just going to work. I'm just going to work. And that's what I've been doing since. And I've been learning. I more recently started volunteering with the Good Fire Alliance. So I've been able to enhance my skills in prescribed burning, also building up leadership skills. And yeah, I mean, I think I'll say this as well, the community that I was surrounded by was the biggest factor. Like, I mean, I've talked about it many times. The content I'm learning about inspires me. I love learning about the land. I love ecology, but it's really the community that has gotten me to where I am here, the support system. And so, yeah, I mean, like Shelly said, like seizing those opportunities, mentorship, just working hard. Because it is hard to work hard, but it will pay off. And so that's kind of my little story. Yeah, I'll pass it back to you, Allison.
Yeah. We're just so lucky to have you. I'm like, oh, thank God. I'm so glad you did that internship and now we have you at the Laguna Foundation. It's great. And yeah, thank you for talking a little bit. I mean, I'm amazed hearing everyone's different paths, right? And really it shows how many different ways you can get into this work. There is no one way. It is different for everybody. It looks different. And like we've said, it depends on your mentors, on your community, on your bandwidth, your capacity, what you're able to do, how much of this hard work you can do. So there are so many different factors that contribute to how everyone gets to where they are in this field. And it is enlightening to hear some of those stories that are out there. And Taylor, I would like to pass it over to you to talk a little bit more about your journey and your background with this work.
Yeah, hearing everyone talk, it makes me seem like we should pick mentors and not majors in college. It's like, it just, that's kind of where my story takes me is I was in my undergrad, I was undeclared and didn't really know what I wanted to do. I just wanted to go play basketball. That's what I was doing. And, you know, junior year came around. It's like, okay, you need to pick something. And I took environmental studies class and I got on the millennial train of let's save the world, which there's nothing wrong with it, but it's like, it's very powerful. And I saw everything that seemed to be happening. And I was like, I want to do something about this. What can I do? I guess the obvious answer was do environmental studies. And so I was in that major for a while. And then I don't know, it didn't seem like the job prospects would be there, which it's hard to get a job in that field, in our field. And so I was like, okay, chemistry. And then I was in chemistry lab and I was like, okay, you're telling me all this stuff is happening and nothing's happening. Like I can't see it. I just see bubbles. And then I was like, well, what can I see? And I decided to do geology, and it's literally everywhere. It's like, what better way to help the planet than to like know how it works? And that was a choice that I made. And after school, you kind of get looped into environmental consulting as a job. That's where most of us go. And I did 2 jobs locally in Sonoma County and left for a little bit to try and find a job in Portland. Couldn't do that. They don't really want to hire people from California and Oregon. And ended up back here, had another job doing environmental consulting. And I couldn't find like the heart in what I was doing. And I went back to school, got a certificate in GIS, so ArcGIS, stuff like that, map making. And that really opened up the doors for me to be involved in conservation, and honestly helped me get my job at Ag and Open Space. And now that I'm here, do I see myself represented more so than I did in environmental consulting? So there's women now, and it's like, that didn't happen. Like geologists are men, and they're getting there, but it's typically men. And I'm surrounded by women at Ag and Open Space, and it's awesome to have so many strong figures and strong leaders. And shout out to Kathleen Marsh, who's my supervisor. And I'm just so happy to be there. And I went into the interview kind of like, I'm looking for a mentor. That's really what I'm looking for. And I just really feel like I've been supported and cared about. And now we've just got to work on the people of color thing, right? I don't see many, but there's some people of color in my position and above me, which is motivating to know that I can move up. And I think that's all the questions.
Yeah, thanks. I just wanted to note, love the shout out to Kathleen. Just had to plug that Kathleen's going to be on our mentors panel. So if you all want to hear from her, she will be on that panel. We're super, happy to have these folks. give their perspective as well. And yeah, I just wanted to point out that there are even niches within the environmental field, as you mentioned, right? Like environmental consulting has different challenges perhaps than where we're at, which is more of conservation and education, nonprofits and agencies. So yeah, the challenges differ depending on where you choose to take your interest in this field. And that is worth noting that you experienced different things when you were working in that field versus where you are now. So thank you all for sharing. I also just wanted to say too that I was told once from my cousin to, you know, like to do GIS work, and he's like, it's GIS, it's because it's called GIS because it stands for guaranteed income source. And I was like, that sounds great, and I still can't do it because I don't want to. But anyway, just want to put that out there as a great skill. Certainly useful, really, really critical to so many things that are done in the environmental field. So so I want to put that out there for our constituents who are perhaps looking to build their resume or something like that. Yeah, it's a great, great skill. It's certainly worth pursuing. So I want to talk, we kind of started talking about this already with this question, some of the challenges that we see working in this field, and maybe even specific challenges that you've seen or experienced as a woman in the conservation field. We have just about a half hour left, and I want to leave some time for questions. So I just want to go through and see if there's anything you all want to expand on as far as the challenges you mentioned, or if there are other challenges you want to note for folks out there. And I will pass it off to perhaps Taylor. Perhaps let's go back to you to expand on what you mentioned before.
Yeah. Gosh, life is a challenge. The challenge I'm having right now is finding like what I could be, you know, an expert in. Like, what's the next step? And I think, you know, getting your foot in the door and getting the job is one thing, but if you want to be happy and if you want to excel in your career, you have to have something that you're passionate about. And at Ag and Open Space, we're surrounded by, we've got fire ecologists, plant ecologists, and a guy who's really good at enforcement. And so you can be good at anything, and you'll be like that, you know, you just want to be like a go-to person for something. And so that's a challenge. I think if you got your degree, you don't necessarily study anything in particular. And like Sophie's doing the bird stuff is really cool and such a niche that, you know, she will be in demand for, you know, bird related things. And yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Yeah, it's hard to figure out the next step. It's hard to know where to go and, you know, to specify or to generalize, or yeah, figuring out your path can be really challenging and can be an ongoing challenge in this field, perhaps more than others, because of the amount of time it can take to get to a stable position, right? So it's like something you question over and over again. I just really appreciate you all sharing about these different things. And I know it's hard to like talk about challenges, but I think it's super helpful for folks to hear, you know, what's out there. So I will pass it over to let's see, who is next? We've got Shelly, I think. Pass it over to you.
Sounds good. Thanks, Allison. Yeah, I think for me, one of the biggest challenges, we have alluded to it already, if not like explicitly said, that it's incredibly expensive to live here. There's just no way around that. Sonoma County is an incredibly expensive place to live, and it's really challenging to find those sustainable career level positions that are are compensating you with what you need to be able to make a living here, and not just, you know, a roof over your head and food to eat, but also like to be able to maybe save some money or pay off those student loans, right? Like there's so many things that that economic challenge really magnifies. And so it's also really competitive. And so, you know, personally, like right now I work 2 separate jobs to be able to get what I need. I don't, which is its own challenge of balancing the 2 positions. And I just really feel like there's, even when the opportunities are out there, like maybe there's a job that is permanent and has benefits, but it doesn't pay very well. Or maybe there's a job that pays well, but it's temporary and it's seasonal. And so bouncing around through those, which are really incredible learning experiences and life experiences, but then looking for that, like, is there a landing spot for me, right? Is there a spot where I can settle in and feel like this is my career and feel like I have the compensation that I need to continue living, you know, comfortably here, has been a big challenge for me. And I think that those challenges are real for every single person in this county, and especially in this field. The conservation field is not notorious for being well paid. And then I feel like there's just no doubt about the fact that these challenges are magnified, especially for, you know, underserved or historically marginalized communities. And I just wanted to mention that as well.
Yeah, thank you for mentioning that. And yeah, this is a direction that this field and honestly our whole society can do more in and can move in. I mean, placing more value on this work is one step. And I think I'm starting to see a shift towards that, starting to see more paid internships, which is great. But in order to, you know, we got to pay people to save the planet, right? Like there's got to be some investment in that work. And I hope to see us move in that direction as a field and and beyond as well. And I really appreciate the folks out there that are doing this work to make these changes and that value this shift in the field and value paying people, value this like inclusion aspect to this work. So shout out to those of you out there who are doing that as well. I will pass it over to Sophie to talk a little bit more about some of these challenges.
Yeah, I think just to speak to like challenges in wildlife conservation work, especially early career, because that's where my experience lies mostly, is that it's pretty logistically challenging. The field seasons are short, sometimes as short as 2 months, hopefully as long as like 7 months, 4 to 7 months, I feel like is more usual. And that's because, you know, spring and summer are the breeding seasons. And so that's when a lot of work is done in field work. So then it's pretty hard to find work in winter. And it's just really exhausting applying to jobs constantly and just kind of being in a constant state of instability and looking for work. Also, it can be really challenging to find stability geographically. A lot of wildlife conservation field work is done, you know, all over the place and in really remote rural places. And that can be really fulfilling and fun for people if that is sustainable for them. You know, it's cool to go to new places and live in different places and meet new people. But it can be really hard to maintain relationships, or, you know, if you have you know, things that you need to do at home as like a caretaker, things of that nature. It's not impossible to find wildlife jobs that are local to you. So I don't want to discourage folks with that at all. Like, you know, they're out there. But yeah, I think that that is a big challenge that I've run into is like, you know, to maintain my relationship, I don't think I can go to Nebraska for a bird job. And so that narrows things down when I'm looking for jobs. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. That's something I've run up against too. Like, can I just sustain doing all of this seasonal work? And yeah, I appreciate you bringing that particular piece in because of folks who are listening who may be considering like, could I get into this field? Could I do this work? And knowing that there are lots of opportunities all over the United States and all over the world. It could take you so many places if that is something you're excited about. And that being said, it can be hard to settle in one area depending on your particular niche in the environmental field. And so gaining some skills or gaining a particular area that you're familiar with can be really useful. I know this gets particularly tricky for like plant and veg people where you just become really, really like familiar with this particular place, and every job wants you to be really familiar with this particular place. So it's just something to consider as you're looking at building your experience in the field. Those logistics are really important. And even things like Sophie mentioned, you know, doing work with birds requires getting up like really early in the morning, or sometimes depending on the birds you study, it can be that you're out all night if you study owls. So those are great considerations when you're looking at these jobs. Just taking stock of who you are, what you like, and seeing if it really matches with this field. If you love to move around, like wildlife or, you know, birds can be good. If you want to focus in an area, another area or another like niche might be more helpful. So, and I will say that Sonoma County in particular, we have so many environmental organizations. I think we are uniquely positioned here within Sonoma County and the Greater Bay Area to be able to stay a little bit more local because there is such an emphasis in this area on this type of work, and there is this community value placed on it. So we're really fortunate in that way. I will pass it over to Annie.
Thanks, Allison. Let's see. So this question was a challenge. I'll just say that. I guess one of my particular challenges, it's kind of more just like my own morals. I was, you know, my little relationship with restoration and conservation is that we should be managing the land for ecological health. And I guess a challenge for me is that a lot of these projects or restoration happenings, they look at quantity over quality. For instance, like maybe there's a planting project and they're looking at, you need this many woody species, you know, and that's it. It's not going into the management of the invasives. It's not going into the management for wildlife or for the people. And so for me, it's a real challenge when the funding for these projects, the goals of this funding does not match my goals, my own personal goals for the land. And so, yeah, I find that as a challenge just to balance that mental health for myself. It's like, okay, Annie, you can only do so much. And then just like to tie it back to the woman stuff, as a young lady who's just beginning her career, it's hard when you have people who have been in it for so long. Sometimes it's hard for them to take you seriously because you do have these different perspectives. So because I'm hopping on the shout out train, shout out to Sasha Burlman, founder and director of Fire Forward. She is a strong, badass lady who is doing good work at a large scale, and she is setting her goals. And she's finding funding for her goals. You know, and to me, that's beautiful work. And that's inspiration to me. And it's where I aspire to go with my career, to be able to lead projects that you dream of, something that it's like, oh my gosh, my dream is coming true. And to not just have it be a mitigation project for some housing development. So that would probably be my challenge.
Yeah, I could see that, especially with the restoration work, you know, how these targets and goals and different management strategies can really change your feeling about the project and your role in it. And I think this is something that I've seen more so like working at the Laguna, where we do more contract-based work. It can be different, right? Like this is not true always at every agency or organization, like how, and it's not true for all of our projects at the Laguna Foundation, right? It just depends on how these are set up. And that if you are out there and you're interviewing for maybe one of these jobs, you know, that might be a good question to ask. Like, how are your project goals set, right? Like it's good to know where it's coming from and how it's driven. Is this kind of work contracted, or are you setting these project goals yourself? I think that is a really important thing to know, especially in the restoration field.
I would probably add too, like, although it's a challenge, it's still possible to find that love for the project. You may be like, oh my gosh, this is a horrendous site, but it's still possible to fall in love with it. And I've been in that position where I'm like, oh my God, weedy mess. But I love this place because hydrologically, it's just so unique or something like that. So don't let that get you down.
Yeah. And you know you're doing that good work to improve that place as well, which is always,
Yeah.
I mean, that's why we're all here. Like we're doing this good work that is really fulfilling. Yeah, and we wanted to end by just giving like one tip or piece of insight to young people entering the conservation field. Love to do a quick go around for that. And then we do have some great questions in the chat that we'll get to as well. So I will hand it over to Sophie to start us off with a tip or a piece of advice.
Sure. My piece of advice is to be a generalist. Crows are generalists, and who doesn't want to be a crow? But yeah, I don't know. I just think that it's important to recognize that any new skill or new thing to learn about has value in this field and will be useful down the line. I think like having a more just like holistic view of the world in conservation is something that like we need that. So yeah, I would encourage everyone to try and be generalists, and it is helpful to like specialize and have unique skills for finding jobs, but like in bird work, it's really cool to like pay attention to the plants and see how the phenology of plants and birds link up. And yeah, so that's my piece of advice.
Good advice. As a generalist, I'm also, I mean, definitely like, I would say I'm way far on the spectrum of generalist, like extreme generalist as far as this field goes. So if any of you out there have questions about that and what that looks like, you can send me an email. We could talk about more specific skills. I will send it over to Annie for a piece of advice or a tip.
My advice to you is, if you have not already, find your community, find your support system, because you can't do it alone. And the world cannot be saved by a single person. So yeah, just connect with people, you know, explore their minds, let them explore yours, and just build those relationships. That's my advice.
Yeah, And they're nice. It's nice people in this field. It's not, you know, it's a good field where you can reach out and get to know folks. Even in this funny time, you know, like that is still something that is possible over Zoom as well, or other methods. I'll hand it over to Taylor.
My one piece of advice is to just be who you are. I don't know, I feel like we all try to go to a job interview or look for job opportunities trying to be what they want, or like, you know, I don't know. It's just, I feel like it's going to be your future and you're going to spend the majority of your time there. So just show up and talk about what you like to talk about, and ask for what you'd like, and ask questions if you're confused. I feel like even now I'm looking at opportunities and it's so confusing on the internet. There's like, you know, but who do I talk to and what actually is available to me for classes? It's like, just find someone and email them, or just call them. Now I just call people. It's scary, but it's okay, you know.
Yes. Yeah, that is a great point. Like, we forget, yeah, we could just pick up the phone and call someone and ask them what's up with this thing, and that is still totally an option. Something that I do as well. And I think that's great advice, to show up as your authentic self, and people will see that, and you are most comfortable in that self, and that is what is important. So I echo that as well. I will pass it over to Shelly.
Okay. Yeah, I appreciate you bringing that up to Taylor. I also really resonated with that. Like, I think especially as women, it is sort of our work to go out and not try to be what other people want us to be, but to really like feel empowered to find out if this is a good fit for us and be really honest about who we are and what we need. And so I think my piece of advice for young people coming into this field is also just to know that you're choosing this path, like, not because it's an easy one, right? Not because there's going to be like this red carpet rolled out for you. Not because you're not going to face hardship, or that there's not going to be adversity. You know, it's not because it's well paid or glamorous, but that you're choosing to work in the conservation field because it's such important work. Like, it's good work. It is needed work. It is meaningful and fulfilling work. And all of us, everyone and this planet, like, needs you to do it. And so, like, we want you to be there and to go forth and to do this work, even though it's hard. And so I think that the advice that comes along with that, you know, might often just be about like self-care, right? And like, what do you need to do to take care of yourself, to make sure that you're getting filled back up while you're giving yourself to this really important work? And, you know, how are you like setting and maintaining your personal boundaries so that you can not get used up, you know? So there's still more of you to give. And so that's my advice.
Yes. Yeah. That is the rallying call. It is important work, and that is why we are here. That is why we are on this panel. And the other thing is that there are other people, amazing people, like the people you see on this panel, who are invested in this work too, who care. You really do enter into a warm community with coming into this work. And there is a space, as my recent new hero, Dr. Ayanna Elizabeth Johnson, says, there is something for everyone to do to save the world. There is a space for everyone and their skills and what they can bring, whether it is art, whether that is being really good at identifying birds or tracking wildlife or planting native plants. There is a space for everyone in this field. And we want to see more people doing it. So thank you all so much for talking a little bit about your experiences and your knowledge and your projects. It is really inspiring to hear about all this work going on in Sonoma County. I want to talk about there are a couple questions in the chat. The one I wanted to bring up first is that there is a question that says, a lot of us in conservation nonprofits are working on diversity, equity, and inclusion. Do you have thoughts on how we make substantial improvements, not just lip service? So I'll let you all think about that just for a minute. I know we've talked a little bit about this. How can nonprofits make substantial improvements? And whenever you're ready, Sophie, I'm gonna pass it off to you first for this particular question.
Yeah, this is something that I've given a lot of thought to. And Anne is at Point Blue, my organization. I actually, for my capstone project in 2019, I made recommendations for diversity, equity, and inclusion in hiring and recruitment at the Palmer Field Station. And I think that something that conservation faces in this challenge is that up until recently, a lot of job opportunities were word of mouth, and a lot of just like organizations, like knowing about organizations is like fairly insular. And so I think something that can be done that is actionable is recruiting widely and making sure that folks that aren't in your immediate community are hearing about your job opportunities and internship opportunities. And yeah, I mean, I think just compensation is a big one as well that, you know, everyone is going to say, because this field is just like not well funded. I don't know if it's not well funded or if we're just not prioritizing paying people. I struggle with that thought a lot. And yeah, that's what I have off the top of my head. I hope that's helpful.
Yeah, definitely. The wide recruitment, getting the word out about these positions in various communities, doing that diverse outreach is huge, and compensation, as we've discussed, can be a barrier to access as well. Seeing lots of nods, but Shelly, is there anything you wanted to add to that, what Sophie mentioned?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I just want to like echo everything that Sophie said, spot on. And then also share that I think that recruitment and, you know, the hiring processes and getting that funding is such an important place to start. And recently I heard this metaphor about, you know, DEI and building a more diverse workforce. And so, you know, the metaphor is like there's a dinner party, right? And so you send everybody the invitation, and you're sending it far and wide, and everyone is invited to the party. But then, you know, you think about this and how that might work out in real life, that like some of your guests at your dinner party are going to have food allergies, or, you know, only have selective choices for what they are, you know, prefer to eat, right? Vegan or vegetarian, or, you know, all of these different realms, right? And so when it comes to inclusivity, like sending the invitation isn't quite enough. It's also up to you to prepare a meal that is going to be in service of those communities. And so really looking inward to your organization, and yes, like spread that invitation far and wide, but then also looking inward as like, are you creating something that's going to meet the needs of the people that you're inviting to the party?
Yes. How can you, I heard this on a recent meeting I was in, and it's something that I have locked onto, but how can you show up and in for these communities that's the question I feel like we should be asking, rather than how do you bring them in, right? Like, how do you show up? That's been helpful for me to think about, and a big question to ask. A lot of work to be done there, which is, for me, I get excited about that kind of stuff. I wanted to open it up. Taylor, do you have anything to add to that question about what are substantial improvements that could be done for diversity, equity, and inclusion?
Yeah, kind of building off what Shelly said, like how, how did you word it? But like sending out the invitation isn't doing it all. And it was brought up during a meeting at Ag and Open Space that like we were translating material in Spanish for our Latino community in Santa Rosa, but that wasn't reaching them, and we're confused about why. But it's, I guess, like most of communicating in those communities is done through word of mouth for them and like leaders that they have in their community. And so there's ways, like there's deeper ways for us to do that rather than just slapping a label on it and calling it good. But.
Right. That's a great example. Learning how people communicate, different avenues for getting the word out that vary by community and by different fields and by, like it's different for families versus like young working people. So there's a lot to learn, but I think we can dive into some of those different communication avenues for sure. And Annie, I wanted to hand it over to you to see if you have anything to add to that. And then I have time, I think, for just one more question.
Yeah, I'll make it quick. Everything these three ladies just said, obviously on point. I would also just say that making sure internally that your employees are also taken care of. Yes, you want to reach other audiences, but internally, you need to just have your stuff together. You need to be taking care of your own people as well. So externally and internally, that's basically where it's at.
Right.
Yeah. Next question.
That is a great point too. Yeah, that it's not just this outward facing work, but also inward, this more holistic, cohesive look at the field as a whole and what can be done to make it more diverse and inclusive is really important for retention and for the health of your current staff. We just got another question. I can't decide. Okay, I'm just going to combine them and feel free to speak to whatever you'd like. And this is kind of complicated, but we have a senior in high school out there in the audience who's very interested in getting into the conservation field. Yay, welcome. Love to have you join us. She says, do you have any advice or tips on getting started or getting your foot in the door? So can any of you speak, and I'll see if you can any of you speak to like the first step, like getting the foot in the door? Think back, like very beginning, what are some good places to start? We talked a little bit about general advice, but what about beginning steps? And the other question I wanted to bring in before we end it, and we don't really have much time, but was about work-life balance in this field. Can you talk about, do you have a work-life balance? What does that look like? Anything you want to speak to with either of those? So beginning steps and ongoing work-life balance. And I will hand it over to Annie to start.
Two great questions. I would say to get your foot in the door, network. If you don't like that word, friendship, relationships, build that. Just put yourself out there, get your name heard, just get people to know who you are, or at least be familiar. Yeah, that would probably be my advice on that. In regards to what was the other question?
Work-life balance.
Work-life balance.
Does it exist?
Like I said, coming from someone who has done 3 jobs in school at the same time, do not do that. It is terrible. It's absolutely awful. But it comes back to that support system. I have to have people keep me in check when I'm working too hard. And if I didn't have those people, I'd be a mess. So there is a balance. It's just, for me personally, I needed help to find that balance. I don't know if that answers your question. I hope it does, but sorry.
Yeah, no, I think I was just realizing that maybe I shouldn't have put that to you first, considering like how I know how hard you hustle. So like, maybe you're not the best person to answer that, but I
Okay.
appreciate you letting people know that, it can be really hard. I think that's a great question, like it can be really hard to have that work-life balance. So we are at 3:30. I do want to give you all a chance to address this question about getting your foot in the door, beginning steps, and work-life balance. So I will hand it over to Taylor if there's anything you want to add to what Annie said, and then we'll keep going around.
Yeah, I'll be quick. I think volunteering at I'll shout out. I started with Daily Acts, and that was really nice. They do lots of stuff. And then there is no work-life balance if there's a pandemic going on because you'll be working at home. I don't know. I feel like, yeah, that's how it's going.
Yeah, even harder now than it was before. I also echo volunteering is a great way to start. Just get out there. It also tells you, like, do I really want to do this? You can do all kinds of different volunteering things, and it gives you an idea of where you may want to go within the field. So it's a great way to get started. Pass it over to Shelly.
Yes, to all of those things. I think like there is sort of that step 0 level, right? Like before you get to step 1, there's like a step 0. And so, being new in this field, I think it's important to just start getting involved, whether that is volunteering with an organization or whether that's a class that you're taking or, a person that you have met that you want to learn more from and figuring out how to, make that happen. Because what starts to happen is once you're in those experiences, it's like, oh, well, this opened up this door to this other thing that I'm really interested in. And you kind of follow that thread. And then you're like, well, then I met this other person. And then I found out that this whole, field exists that I didn't know about, and follow that thread. Right. And so really just staying true to yourself and, checking in with what you want and need, and then using that to kind of guide you through where you're going to go, and just building those experiences so that you'll know that you don't like being up all night, even though you love owls, right? And then, I just have to echo everybody's work-life balance. It's super challenging. It's super challenging during the pandemic. It's super challenging working from home and trying to have a work-life balance. And I've also found myself recently being like, why do I keep taking my work home with me, right? Like I'm supposed to be off the clock and I'm still thinking about it and trying to make it better. And like, how do I get better at that, like separation, so I can have this free time in my own mind? And I'm going to share my epiphany with you all. And I have been trained my whole life to take my work home with me with homework. And so like as an educator, I was like, wait a minute, like why are we spending all of this time practicing taking this work home? And then like, I don't understand why it's so hard for me to separate the two, right? So it's something I'm certainly working on personally, to how to create and maintain that balance.
Yeah, constant challenge, definitely. And yeah, setting those mental boundaries might be like, I find that incredibly challenging, and I know others do too. Sophie, over to you to close this out.
Echo what everyone has said already. I think just to build off what Shelly said, I think asking for help, like meeting people and then asking for help, like a lot of people in this field are eager to support emerging conservationists, and they might just be like shy and not like know how to help or like not know to offer. But yeah, I think everyone wants to see more people succeed in this field. So definitely ask for help. And with that, I mean, if anybody is like interested in the field that I'm in, feel free to reach out to me. I'll give my information to Allison to put in the follow-up email. But yeah, if you're interested in like wildlife conservation or bird conservation, feel free to reach out and ask.
Thank you. Thank you all. Big round of applause to you. Thank you for sharing so many valuable insights. It was so inspiring for me to get to hear all of you, and a lot of thank yous and compliments coming into the chat. So thank you for sharing all this wisdom with our audience as well. This webinar will be recorded and it will be sent to registrants. We encourage you to share if you think there's anyone in your life who would benefit from this. And please sign up for the rest of the series. The mentors, some of the mentors that were mentioned in this webinar will be on that panel, including Kathleen and Sasha. So you will get to hear their perspective in that event as well. And we will be also before that talking about climate change, right? So and diving a little bit more into what it's going to take to save the world and the work to do that next time with another round of early career leaders. So I will include that link in the follow-up email as well. Big thank you to you all. Big thank you to Ag and Open Space and all of our partner organizations represented here today. We really appreciate your support as well. And we really benefit from such a collaborative environmental field here in Sonoma County. Truly, it is such a blessing. So thanks to everyone out there. And I hope to see you at the next event in the series next week. Bye, everybody.